The Tigers aren't done quarterback shopping in the portal. We've got a new name. You'll hear it next, Locked on LSU. Here we go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We're free, available wherever you get great podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. And as always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So thank you sincerely for that. Thank you for helping make the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network in the world. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The college football playoff is here. FanDuel is the best place to get into the action all playoff long. So visit FanDuel.com to get your college football playoff profit boosts every game day. LSU has 2 committed quarterbacks in the portal. I should say 2 signed quarterbacks. Landon Clark of Elon was first. Sam Leavitt from Arizona State followed. Now, we've been telling you here that the Tigers are not done. And Husan Longstreet from Southern Cal is the name that we've been talking about. 5-star who just spent his freshman season at USC. He redshirted during his high school recruitment, visited Ole Miss. At one time was a Texas A&M commit before flipping to and signing with USC. Well, got another name to mention to you because apparently Lane Kiffin and the crew are not done, and they are very serious about adding another quarterback in this transfer portal cycle. So I was told Tuesday afternoon that LSU is expected to host Colorado quarterback Ryan Staub later this week. Now, I'm going to give you Ryan Staub's bio and all the background here in just a quick second, but a quick reminder as well that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of this week is the American Football Coaches Association convention. It's the annual coaches convention, which happens every January. And so it's a dead period. So there's no visits Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of this week, meaning no prospects can come to campus and coaches can't go see prospects. So you expect a little bit of a quieter beginning to this week. However, by the end of this week, of course, Thursday, Friday, you expect that visits will ramp up again. And LSU is very serious about adding another quarterback. So let me tell you a little bit about Ryan Staub. So Ryan Staub was a member of the class of 2023 when he signed with Colorado. He was a 3-star as a high school recruit. So a guy that had some really nice offers, ultimately landed at Colorado. Arizona, Texas had offered him as well. So 6 foot, 200-pounder. He's out of California. Coming out of high school, he was a consensus 3-star, the number 733 overall prospect, the 39th best quarterback in the country when he signed out of high school with Colorado. So he goes to Colorado in the class of 2023. So effectively, that was the year Dion showed up. And Staub sits for 2 seasons at Colorado behind Shedeur Sanders. So he has limited action as a backup, with Shedeur obviously playing and starting for those 2 seasons in 23 and 24. Well, 2025 rolls along, Staub's 3rd year at Colorado. Well, they bring in Caden Salter. They also brought in Julian Lewis. So you're talking about what ended up being a crowded quarterback room. So in 2025, Staub played in 4 games. He attempted 55 passes. He threw for 3 touchdowns, 427 yards, and 4 interceptions. So you're talking about, again, limited playing time. Over the course of 3 seasons, he's played in a total of 10 games as a backup. Well, with everybody returning there to Colorado, he's looking for greener pastures, new beginnings. I also think that it's noteworthy as the portal cycle rolls along, something that you're seeing at a multitude of positions are players that see a need and are trying to capitalize, probably on the advice of very smart agents. So as to say, you can look here with the portal set to close on Friday at still a lot of quarterback needy teams, not just for starters like Tennessee, Miami, but teams like LSU who need more quality depth. And so when there's a need, obviously, if you have a resource, an asset that someone wants, needs, then you can charge a premium. So, I mean, use firewood. If it's freezing outside, you need to build a fire. There's one guy that sells firewood. Well, you're going to pay more for it because you need the firewood. So it's kind of that type of situation where you have a limited supply. You have certain not only demand, but needs at certain spots. And so you have guys jumping in the portal, I think, right now, trying to drive up price based on demand. Well, I think there's a couple of things here that are true. Number one, I think it is certainly true that LSU is continuing to pursue Husan Longstreet. Now, I don't know if Husan Longstreet is specifically looking for a place to go be a starting quarterback, which would stand to reason that's the case. But I think there's two possibilities here that are unfolding with LSU at quarterback. One is they either think Longstreet is not going to end up in Baton Rouge, and so they're pursuing other options like Ryan Staub, or they're bringing in a guy like Staub to say to Longstreet, hey, you want to commit? Come on, but we ain't stopping at you. We got options. And a lot of this can be a negotiation tactic. Now, I had a chance to talk to Cooper Patagna from CBS and 24/7 Sports. He's a national transfer portal analyst. This is this dude's job, is to cover the transfer portal. And I asked him about Husan Longstreet. Listen to what he said.
I don't know. I don't have a feel on it. I think the whole reason that going back to high school and just understanding his wiring and his character a little bit, I know a big thing for him was playing time. He always wanted to play. Mm-hmm. He goes and sits behind Jaden Maeva. So for him to enter the portal and then potentially enter a situation like LSU where you would have to sit behind Sam Levitt, that would be hard for me to see. I think that maybe the thing that they sell him on is, hey, this guy's coming off an injury. He might not have spring. You don't know what's going to shake out. It might be a situation where you see the field earlier than you think. And the other side of that, you sit a year, you get acclimated in the system, and look what I've done. Look what I've done with the quarterbacks that I've had. Look what I've done with Trinidad Chambliss. Look what I've done with Jackson Dart. It's a perfect system for you, and I'm going to surround you with the best weapons in the country. So I think Lane Kiffin's got a good pitch, but like I said, Tennessee, Oregon, Tennessee, Miami. There's a couple other teams out there that Husan Longstreet's probably going to be the best option for him.
Unless, by the way, another starting caliber quarterback somewhere in the country jumps in the portal seeing the need that's there. Don't discount that. Anyway, I don't want to get sidetracked. The point being, what Cooper Patagna said there is absolutely the pitch that LSU is making to Husan Longstreet, which is, yes, we signed Sam Levitt, but he's still injured. You're going to take all the reps with the ones in the spring. And, oh, by the way, we had a starter last year at Ole Miss who we thought was going to be our guy. He got injured. The backup came in, played well, and we rode the backup. So you will have an opportunity if you outplay that guy to come here and play. So that's part of it. The other part is absolutely play the long game. We're going to develop you here. And even if you have to sit and be a backup in 26, if you're the guy in 27 and beyond a couple of years, we're going to turn you into a first rounder, just like we did Jackson Dart, just like we took a guy like Trinidad Chambliss, turned him into a potential first rounder as well. That option's there. That's the sell they're making. But they also have to have other options, which is why they're pursuing Ryan Staub. One other thing to keep in mind, why LSU wants to add a third quarterback, sort of alluding to what we just talked about there with the injury to Sam Levitt. Remember, you're going to go into spring understanding Sam Levitt is unlikely to be able to participate. Certainly is not going to participate fully. Well, if all you have is going into camp is Emil Picarella and Landon Clark, that's two quarterbacks. Like in the NFL, they bring on what they refer to as camp arms, right? You'll typically have a fourth quarterback in training camp because you can't have your starter out there wearing out their arm, throwing hundreds of passes every single day. You have to have camp arms. So you're going to need another arm there in training camp or in spring practice as well. So another reason why very likely they're looking to add quality depth at that position. So maybe it's Husan Longstreet. And as I understand, LSU is still pushing for Longstreet. But Ryan Staub could either be the backup to Longstreet or sort of a stalking horse to try to make sure Longstreet jumps aboard. don't sleep on this. I do think LSU is going to add another quarterback before the end of this portal cycle. Now, they've already added now another running back. It looks like that room is finished. We'll tell you who they added on Tuesday and why this is significant. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. College football playoff is here. FanDuel is giving all customers even more ways to get in on the action every single game day of the playoffs. Because right now, every college football playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost waiting for them in the app. Here's what I love about it. You get to use the profit boost on the bets you already feel good about. If you're like me and you are rolling with Indiana because it feels like the public hasn't caught up with just how good Indiana is, even with their last 2 wins, no matter what number they put on that, I'd lay it with Indiana because they're the better team, and I think they're going to beat Miami handily. So you want to ride with the favorite you think controls the matchup, you can do it, and then you apply the profit boost so you go after even bigger winnings. And when you win, FanDuel pays out instantly, which is perfect for playoff football. FanDuel is the best place to get in on the action all playoff long. So visit FanDuel.com to get your college football playoff profit boosts every single game day. That's at FanDuel. I want to talk about the running back that LSU added on Tuesday, but let me take a quick moment to thank you again for making Locked on LSU your first listen of the day. Thank you for making Locked on the #1 sports podcast network. If you have not already, please go check out our new Everydayer Club. It gives you access to an ad-free audio feed for Locked On, compatible with Apple, Spotify, all the podcast apps, and an invite to the members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server, which includes a group chat just for listeners of this show. So please tap the link in the show notes if you'd like to learn more. And thank you again for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network in the world. So Lane Kiffin has continued to rebuild this offense. 2 quarterback commits. We know 9 receiver commits. 4 commits on the offensive line as of this recording. And they've added now 3 running backs with an asterisk, because we talked earlier this week, LSU was able to re-sign Harlem Berry, news we broke a couple of weeks ago on New Year's Eve. And then they, this weekend, were able to re-engage with Caden Durham. Now, told you the story there about Durham. Looked like, they, of course, were going to bring in Kewan Lacey. They prioritized Harlem Berry. So with Frank Wilson gone, Caden Durham looking around going, I'm not going to stay and be a number 3. So he enters the portal. Well, Kewan Lacey stays at Ole Miss. LSU is in need of running back depth. Caden Durham meets with Kevin Smith over the weekend. Caden Durham, a handful of family members were all at football ops on Saturday, and ultimately those conversations were good enough. So Harlem Berry, Caden Durham return. And remember, LSU had added Racine Guillory from Utah and Rod Gainey from Charlotte. But those are 2 smaller backs, young backs, inexperienced backs with a lot of eligibility remaining. One of the things we've talked about here was the desire of this staff to add a bigger physical running back presence. And they did that on Tuesday when Dilin Jones committed to the LSU Tigers. So Dilin Jones from Wisconsin has 3 years of eligibility remaining. He committed on Tuesday. So signed with Wisconsin in 2024. He was a top 10 running back in the country coming out of the state of Maryland. He was the number 8 running back in the country, 6 foot, 208 pounds. And if you go flip on the highlight tape, it'll tell you the story, because this is a guy in Dilin Jones who absolutely can get up the field, can run with some power. And that's maybe what they didn't have in the guys already in the room. By the way, Luke Fickell, the Wisconsin coach before in August in camp of this 2025 season, said this about Dilin Jones.
He is definitely one of those guys that every single day is like game day. He really does. He practices that way. He's got the mentality that way. And that's kind of where he made the step up and kind of showed us, hey, this is the guy that's going to take the first snap at tailback. Nothing against the other guys. It's just his being tenacious, his toughness, his every single day, his ability to show us that, hey, he's going to make a cut. He's going to get the thing vertical. And that's the thing that we were looking for as much as anything. He's made that room better, because that is a competitive room, but he has, another little competitive edge nature that makes a lot of those guys around him better.
Tenacious, make the cut, get the thing vertical. You could tell that's a different style of runner than what you have in the room right now. It is worth noting that Dilin Jones had his season cut short this year. He played in 7 games, but he had his season cut short due to a turf toe injury. So 3 seasons of eligibility remaining, a guy that stylistically is a different runner than what you had and brings that physical presence. And you really right now seemingly should be done at the running back spot, having added Dylan James. So Harlem Berry, Caden Durham, your top 2 running backs return. Dylan James provides a physical presence with 3 years of eligibility remaining. And then you've got Rod Gainey and Racine Guillory, 2 smaller backs, more in the mold of Harlem Berry, coming in to bring some youth and some depth to that running back room. So now you've got 5 running backs via the transfer portal. And as you look at the numbers right now, adding Dylan Jones, that brings LSU to 29 portal commitments. So I know there's a lot of people who have asked, because you've heard me say these numbers, and they're disputing those numbers because On3 and 24/7 list different totals. I am going by, and at LouisianaSports.net, what we have listed are the public commitments. So I think what maybe On3 and 24/7 are listing are the signees. So when LSU formally announces a signee, that's the names that they're listing. I'm looking at the commitments, signees plus those that have verbally committed that maybe haven't put pen to paper yet, that have been formally announced by LSU. And by the way, when I talk to folks at LSU, that is the number they give. So talking to someone at LSU today, I was told 29. So that's where they are. And they're probably not done just yet. But everything they've done to this point is pretty much exactly what we told you the plan was. And so credit to Lane Kiffin and Billy Glasscock, because they had a plan coming in and they have followed that. They've added multiple quarterbacks. They need to rebuild the receiver room. They've done that with 9. They needed to go add offensive linemen. They've got 4. As I understand it, they want to add a couple of more offensive linemen. It was going to be single-digit defensive players. They're at 7. So you add a couple of more offensive linemen. You get to 30, 31 additions via the portal, and you're probably done. So the question is now, who are those players via the portal that you might add on the offensive line? And that's what I want to wrap up with, because the biggest fish still left out in the sea is Jordan Seaton, the big 5-star offensive lineman from Colorado who hit the transfer portal. I'll tell you what I know, and you'll hear Cooper Patagna's opinion on that as well when we continue to wrap up. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. So the biggest fish left in the transfer portal pond is 5-star offensive lineman Jordan Seaton out of Colorado. So if you're not familiar with who Jordan Seaton is, I'll give you the quick bio. We did talk about him previously on an episode briefly when Seaton entered the transfer portal. But here's kind of the bio. He was, depending on what scouting service you look at, offensive tackle out of Washington, D.C. When he was coming out of high school, he was the number 18 overall player in the country. So he was a 5-star plus in the industry composite. He was the number 1 offensive tackle in America. He was from Washington, D.C., then went to IMG Academy in Florida. So technically out of IMG, but originally from the D.C. area. And he had offers from everybody: Ohio State, Tennessee, Bama, Oregon, Maryland, his home state, or that area, OU, Florida, Penn State, Michigan, SC, Georgia, Miami, everybody offered him. Everybody wanted him. 6'5", 300 pounds. He was the number 1 offensive tackle in the country coming out of high school. And ultimately he chose to go play for Deion Sanders there in Boulder. So in the past 2 seasons, he has played a ton of football as the starting left tackle for the Colorado Buffaloes each of the past 2 seasons from when he showed up there in Boulder, and has played really exceptionally well as the starting left tackle. So in 2 seasons there with the Buffaloes, he started more than 20 games, and now has hit the transfer portal and is going to command a gigantic dollar figure. As a matter of fact, Cooper Patagna, who we spoke with a bit ago, I had a chance to talk to Cooper Patagna and asked him specifically about Jordan Seaton, his recruitment, and this is going to be a massive payday.
22-game starter. I think this is something that a lot of teams were monitoring. You know, Bud Elliott, my colleague at CBS Sports, came out and said the number was going to be around $2.5 million. You know, as the day went on, I've heard that's going to be north of 3, could even touch 4, right? Because when you look at the tackle market, the second-rated tackle that we have in the transfer portal was Carius Kern, and then you go down the list and Lance Hurd, right? So there's a lot of names that LSU fans are familiar with. Those guys are supremely talented, but they're a little bit of a mixed bag there. So a guy like Jordan Seaton, who is a bona fide top 50 pick, and that's on the conservative side, that's played the amount of football that he's played and can plug and play at the left tackle. That's another guy, just like the quarterbacks. There'll be a lot of contenders out there, Oregon, Miami, that are replacing guys that are going to the NFL draft, LSU included. His number is only going to continue to grow overnight, and I expect that to be around $4 million. And I think Oregon right now is the team that's connected with him the most.
That's incredible. But it also underscores, remember the conversation we were having at the beginning of this episode about Husan Longstreet jumping in the portal late and the possibility of another quarterback maybe seeing what's unfolding and getting in the portal, because that's what the market is dictating. I don't know Jordan Seaton's scenario at Colorado, but it stands to reason. If you're Jordan Seaton, you're sitting there at Colorado, whatever number they're paying you, congratulations. But you see a need, and if the starting bid, and Bud Elliott's credible and great at what he does, and if Bud Elliott said the starting bid is at 2.5, and here you have Cooper Patagna saying it'll probably get north of 3, maybe closer to $4 million, then of course you're going to go in the transfer portal. But so much of this market is being dictated by need. If you're a team that needs a starting left tackle and you're Jordan Seaton and you're making a very nice payday at Colorado, but you realize you go in the transfer portal and all of a sudden you reset the market, then yeah, why wouldn't you go get paid? So if it's Oregon, as you heard Cooper Patagna say there, or Miami, two very wealthy programs, cash-rich programs, money to spend, who need left tackles. I mean, who doesn't need a bona fide left tackle? Then this makes an awful lot of sense. Now, I know the conversation here is, okay, well, what does this mean for LSU? What I think this means for LSU is they're not going to be in the mix for Jordan Seaton. And I think there is a financial component of this where you're probably, part of you's probably sitting there going, Matt, but I thought LSU had all this money. They do, as evidenced by the fact that they've already signed 29 players via the portal and retained Trades Green, Harlem Berry, Braylon Moore, Whit Weeks, DJ Pickett, PJ Woodland. You think that was free? They had to go pay to retain their guys. They've added 29 players via the transfer portal. And I already told you, the original number that they had on the table for Trinidad Chambliss was close to 4, like 385. The number they ended up paying for Sam Levitt was over $5 million. So let's call it, you had to spend an extra $1.5 million on a quarterback than what you are planning to spend for a starting quarterback. Oh, by the way, Husan Longstreet is still out there as well, and you're looking to add depth. That ain't going to be free. The point is, yeah, LSU is spending a ton of money, but you don't have a limitless amount of money to spend. So that's an important part, to note here. Would you love to have Jordan Seaton? Absolutely. You're talking about arguably the best left tackle in football with multiple years of experience remaining, 2 years left. Now, chances are he plays the 2026 season, stays healthy, has a good year. He goes into the draft, could very well be the first tackle taken. You heard Cooper say he's a top 50 pick, and that's probably being conservative. Could well be much higher than that whenever he goes into the NFL draft. So this is probably his last year in college football, and you'd love to have him. But is it actually sensible to go spend that money? Do you have that money to spend? Maybe not. So if you're LSU, I don't know that I suspect LSU is going to be in the mix for Jordan Seaton. If they do pull this off, and I'm telling you candidly, I don't have the answer to that test. I don't know. I'm certain you make the call because I've told you from the beginning, the intention was add 2 starters at guard and a starter at tackle. Now, maybe Darren Stray, the tackle you brought in from Kentucky, is the answer. But he was a backup this year in Lexington. So you didn't add a guy with starting experience. Jordan Seaton's a guy with starting experience. He fits the mold completely. And you've added bodies on the interior of the offensive line, but you haven't necessarily added plug-and-play starters. Maybe you did. Maybe Jaquan Sprinkle from NC Central can be a starter, moving up, a level from FCS to Power 4. Maybe with William Satterwhite coming in from Tennessee, who's been a backup center, can be a starting guard. Maybe, certainly can compete for it. But the point is, you haven't added those definitively. Now, Lane Kiffin, it is worth mentioning, on Tuesday night did tweet the tiger emoji, which is generally an indicator that he's got a commitment. Who is that commitment? I don't know the answer. I'll be surprised if it's Jordan Seaton. I'll be pleasantly surprised. Of course, one of the names that we continue to talk about is Devin Harper from Calvary Baptist up in Shreveport. Was a longtime LSU commit, flipped to Ole Miss, redshirted this year in Oxford, entered the transfer portal, could very well, and may very well likely end up at LSU. But again, that's a guy who was a top 100 overall prospect, elite level starting potential, but hasn't been a starter yet. So I do think still that the Tigers are going to add another offensive lineman or 2 before this thing shuts down. But Jordan Seaton, I think, would be a pretty big surprise considering the price tag of what it's going to take to get him. Oregon, Miami, probably the leaders for Jordan Seaton. But however that goes, we'll follow it right here on Locked on LSU. So please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Subscribe on YouTube. Hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video, and let a friend know if they love the Tigers. We got you every single day for Locked on LSU. It is your team every day.